All right, can everybody see this Google sheet that I have? It says noun, person, place, thing, idea. Can you guys all see that?
Yep.
Okay, good. So again, so Amelia was talking before class about how this chapter kind of makes you think a lot about nouns, probably more than you've ever thought about nouns in your whole life. So this lecture kind of is going to go over most of the main points that's in that chapter that it was trying to make. And the first things first is this definition of a noun. Traditionally, we think of a noun as a person, a place, a thing, or an idea. That's the traditional definition of noun. Well, as the book highlighted, that's not really a great definition of noun because there's words that are in our language that don't necessarily fall into that criteria. And if we do an exercise in structural grammar, as we'll do here in just a couple of moments, you guys will see, okay, that nonsense word, that's not a noun, that's not a person, place, or thing, but nonetheless, it's a noun. So you guys will see here in a second, especially how that definition of noun doesn't quite hold up. But that's exactly what um, it's taught as in elementary school: person, place, or thing. I don't even think idea gets smacked on. I remember when I was in school, it was person, place, or thing. That's what a noun has traditionally been. So nouns all we can't have our language without the nouns. Nouns and verbs are probably the most important parts of our language. And as I've explained to you guys before, English is a word ordered language, meaning that you know where you know what function a word is based on where it is in the sentence. Compare that to Latin or German, where you know what word goes where based on the suffix at the end of the word. Those languages are a lot trickier to kind of learn. So traditionally, so this is pretty much the basic cookie cutter type sentence. Becky baked the cake. Okay, so whenever we talk about nouns, we have to talk about like where do they go in the sentence? What is their basic function? So Becky is, of course, the first word in the sentence, the first noun that you see in the sentence. And our language kind of dictates that the first main noun in a sentence will be the subject of the sentence. And then we have this action verb, bake. Becky bakes. And then the question of what? What is she baking? The cake. Well, whenever we can add words on to this sentence to make it a little bit more complicated. If we have Becky baked a cake for the potluck, um, the for the potluck is what we would call an indirect object. That is, so the cake is still the direct object here. That's what that is the question. You know a direct object when you can answer the question of what. And the indirect object means they're the indirect receivers of whatever the direct object is. So the people at the potluck are the ones who receive are who the ones who will receive that cake. So they're the indirect recipients of the cake. The thing with the traditional word order. I'll just type this here. Traditional word order that nouns go in the sentence is subject, action verb, direct object, indirect object. That's the traditional word order that our language takes. However, the that doesn't quite always stick. We can have what is called we can have what's called a inverted indirect object, where you kind of flip the order. The indirect goes before the direct. So this sentence right here: Mike bought Ben a bedtime story. Well, if you use the traditional word order, you might think to yourself, okay, Ben is the direct object, bedtime story is the indirect object. But if you really start thinking about it, you'll see that it's actually the opposite. So what did Mike buy? You always have to ask that question, what? What did Mike buy? A bedtime story. Who did he buy that bedtime story for? Ben. So Ben is the indirect object here. He's the recipient of the object. So 90% of the time, probably you will have, I don't know the exact number, that's just a speculation on my part. 90% of the time, you will have the direct object come first. But sometimes the indirect object comes first. So you kind of have to think a little deeply here as far as who is the recipient of the action, then who's the indirect recipient of the action. And I'll give you guys a little clue. You know that it's an indirect object that goes first if you can flip it. So if you said Mike bought a bedtime story for Ben. So if you can flip it where the direct object goes first, and then the indirect object goes second, if you can flip it and the sentence still makes sense, that's when you know that it's a direct object that comes first. You'll know then what the indirect object is. If it doesn't make sense, you would know that it was right already, that a direct object came first. This second sentence: Rachel bought Gabriel a book. Again, we flip the word order. Rachel bought what? A book. Who for? Gabriel. So we flipped that order around, and it still makes sense. It's still a thought that you can wrap your mind around. If you flip this sentence around, it works the same way. This is the traditional way, so we flipped it. Becky baked for the potluck a cake. So again, the indirect object can show up either place in the sentence. You know which is which. You can flip it, and it'll still make sense. Let me give you guys an example of when it doesn't make sense. You see, the book has some good ones. Okay. Let's see. I'll get back to that. Like I said, most of the time, if you can flip them, you know which one's which. So let me pause here really quick and ask. I want to make this whole document a little less big. The font's starting to get on my nerves. Let me ask you guys this. What questions, comments, concerns you guys got about that? Does this make sense? Direct object, indirect object.
It does. It's just like I was saying. I felt like it was like almost irrelevant to, someone learning about. So yeah, it is helpful in trying to figure out defining what a noun is in a sentence, within a sentence, and where it's placed. But it's also it can overcomplicate it and become confusing. So, or that's my opinion. So.
Well, you can kind of see why it would make it, why the book does complicate it, right? Because even with this direct object and indirect object stuff, teachers will often tell students that the indirect always comes after the direct. And
That's not always the case. Yeah.
it's not always the case, right?
And knowing when that's not the case, it's trying to find that out or interpret that within a sentence that makes it more difficult, I guess. So.
Right. And just like with these examples, if you can flip them around, it still makes sense. Becky baked a cake for the potluck.
See, when I was reading this chapter and trying to, like I said, where I thought it was kind of confusing and overcomplicating, I was trying to create sentences and recreating them in my mind, trying to find, and then figure out, what was what. So, and it just started to aggravate me, I guess. So,
Yeah, the just taking a look here at the book.
it's like you gotta like memorize the formula, and it can change based on the sentence, and it's like
That's
blah,
that's just the English language, Amelia.
I know.
That's not even the book. That's the English language, right?
Yeah, that's true.
There's so many exceptions to the rule.
Yeah.
It says here an indirect object is not easy to define. I'm looking on page 33. Indirect objects almost always refer to the people who are in some way indirectly affected by the action, although pinning it down more precisely can be a problem. Sometimes this person is a recipient of the direct object. And it says sometimes the indirect is the beneficiary of the action. But
Didn't it
again,
say like that was the argument too about that? Like somebody's definition of which one they think's the right one being the indirect?
say that again, Amelia. I'm not following.
I said I think that was where I struggled trying to figure out, like, because didn't it say that people are there's arguments about that, like which one is which depending on the sentence?
Yeah, the book's pretty much telling you can't really use that argument about who's the beneficiary or who is the recipient.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's the book pretty much just challenges that idea, right? You can't really that idea has limits. The better way to tell, looking at the word order of the sentence. So rather than overly complicating it, is that who's the beneficiary, who's receiving this, who's receiving that. Rather than overly complicating it, you just kind of got to look for the word order.
Okay.
And it says that anytime you have the word for or to before the
A prepositional phrase, basically.
right, a for or two, just those two, for or two.
Okay.
You see a for or a two, that's oftentimes an indicator of an indirect object. Just notice even here on my example sentences, Mike bought Ben a bedtime story. So bedtime story is the direct object and Ben's the indirect, right? Flipping it back around to the traditional order, Mike bought a bedtime story, and then we know that Ben is the indirect because that word for comes before it. Rachel bought Gabriel a book. That's the inverted order. Rachel bought a book for Gabriel. That for is in front of it. So we know that for is a indicator of indirect object. So the book's pretty much just telling you that the structural grammar is the way to go, right? Because if we think about it in terms of rules and exceptions to the rules and stuff like that, you're going to eventually sort of paint yourself into a corner. But if you just think about the structure of the sentence and what goes where, then that's a more reliable indicator of what is what. That's kind of the point the book is trying to make. Think about grammar structurally rather than socially.
Okay.
Other questions or comments before I move on? Okay, so the next idea we'll talk about is subject complement. Subject complement. And to know what a subject complement is, you kind of have to know your linking verbs. So linking verbs are be verbs. They're variations of the word to be, right? And oftentimes, of course, we're just mostly dealing with teaching grammar right now. But if you're teaching writing, I oftentimes tell my students to stay away from linking verbs as much as possible. Linking verbs tend to be a little too simple of a sentence. Most of the time, you can write a sentence in a better way that uses an action verb. Linking verbs are lazy writing, I think. But we use linking verbs all the time in our everyday speech, even in writing, even though I don't like them. It's correct grammar, but it's not good style. There's a difference there. But one way that I was taught to know the linking verbs, I had a teacher in high school who made us remember it like it's a jingle. Am, is, are, was, were. 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 If we were actually sitting in a classroom, I would make you all painfully say it. And over and over and over, right? Until I drilled it in your head. It's kind of hard to do that on Zoom. But am, is, are, was, were. Am, is, are, was, were. Then you also have grow, seem, become, appear. Grow, seem, become, appear. Those words are also linking verbs. So you kind of got to memorize them, actually. These are words that you need to memorize, because otherwise you'll get your nouns mixed up. Because in a linking verb sentence, the noun that comes after the linking verb, we call that the subject complement. So instead of calling it a direct object, we call it the subject complement. So this is the famous syllogism from Aristotle. All humans are mortal. Socrates is a human. Therefore, Socrates is mortal. That's one of the first bits of logic that Aristotle discusses in his book Logic. But we have are and is as our linking verbs. So the word that comes after the linking verb then is the subject complement. So mortal, human, then mortal again. Those are our subject complements in that sentence. The reason for that is anytime you have an am, is, are, was, were, grow, seem, become, appear, anytime you have those, you're almost doing math, right? It's like saying humans equals mortal. Socrates equals human. Therefore, Socrates equals mortal. So it's almost like anytime you use am, is, are, was, were, you're pretty much saying something is something. A equals B. If you notice with the way this logic is running, right? If we put a letter over humans, that's why I color coded it, right? Think of the yellow as in terms of A. Think of the purple in terms of B. Then the greenish color in terms of C. A equals B. C equals A. Therefore, C equals B. So our language is almost fairly mathematical in this way. Anytime we use linking verbs, you're saying something is equal to something. And A is B. B is C. Well, when you do that, whatever comes after the verb's not a recipient of the action. You're saying it is that. So there's a big difference between a subject complement and a direct object. But the best way to know it in terms of your grammar and being able to distinguish between the two is thus memorizing your linking verbs. Am, is, are, was, were. Verb, seem, become, appear. One of the things that I like to do whenever I'm writing an essay is I will use the Control F on the keyboard, and I'll search for am, is, are, was, were, and I'll notice, okay, I did that in 20 of my sentences. So oftentimes I'll go back and rewrite those sentences in a way where I'm not using linking verbs, just because I think that linking verbs kind of make for I will say not stylistically inspired writing. But whenever we're just dealing with the realm of grammar, it's fine. But grammar and style, again, are two different things. Knowing these linking verbs. And then if you know that it's a linking verb, you're knowing that structurally it's like putting an equal sign there. You're almost doing math. Good logic is built on on linking verbs, because that's how we kind of reason. So that was a very long-winded explanation. Let me stop again. Questions or comments? Makes sense. Okay. So then we have to talk about prepositions, because nouns can also follow a preposition. And prepositions often give you extra information in the sentence. That's their main purpose. A preposition phrase really isn't a direct object or an indirect object. Preposition phrases are there to give you extra information. And the traditional definition of preposition phrase is that answers locations. Preposition phrases often answer matters of location, direction, accompaniment, and purpose. I think that's a little fancy of a definition, frankly. My basic definition is they mostly just give you extra information. So you can always tell preposition. This is a this is a piece of advice that my middle school teacher gave me way back in the day. I still remember it. She said you can always tell a preposition, a word's a preposition, if you can answer the question, where can a cat go? Under the porch, toward the stairs, above the window. So if you can, that sounds kind of silly, right? But if you can answer the question, where can a cat go? And then the first word that comes out of your mouth is oftentimes a preposition. In the gazebo, toward the door, against the wall, inside of the litter box. So rather than coming up with a big list of prepositions, think about it like that. Where can a cat go? Then the first word that comes out of your mouth is pretty much always a preposition. But a preposition never goes by itself. It always has to have an object. And nouns oftentimes too function as objects of the preposition. So Jeff read his grammar book in the gazebo. I was talking a minute ago about sentences that don't make sense. If you flip the word order, you might be tempted to think in the gazebo is an indirect object. Well, not in this case. You can't say Jeff read the gazebo, his grammar book. That wouldn't make sense. So here's the case on my sheet where it doesn't make sense. This is not an indirect object. It's a prepositional phrase. Where can a cat go? In the gazebo. All right. So the preposition never goes by itself. It always has an object that goes with it. So if you can identify what's what, that's an important skill to have, because even when you're doing your own writing, being aware of, are you using too many linking verbs? maybe you're doing some type of logical reasoning, some that requires almost mathematical precision. It's important to know what's the subject, what's the verb, what's the direct object, what's the indirect object, because our whole language is frankly founded on this. Like I said, other languages like German and Latin, the direct object can come before the subject. You know what goes where if you're translating into English based on the suffixes at the end of the words. So I have a little, what I have done, I put 10 practice questions on here, and I made up some words. Okay, I made up some words. It'll sound like gibberish, but let's see if we can kind of figure out what's what in these sentences. So who all we got? Who all is with us here in our room? It says I'm listed here twice. Just 4 of you. So let's take this first one. Zarni gave liber gibbers to Squiggledorfs. Okay. So, Zot, you want to go first? What's this? I'll ask you a few questions. What's the subject of the sentence?
Hello, yeah, sure. So the first sentence, the subject is Zarni.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. What's the direct object?
The direct object, I'm not sure how to pronounce it. It's Libergibus.
Libergibbers, right?
Yeah. Okay.
And the indirect.
Yeah, the end of it is two Squiggledorfs. Yeah.
And that's the indirect, right?
Yeah.
Now, this is a traditional sentence where the direct object comes before the indirect object. So we know that this word is the indirect object. Why? Even though we don't even know what the word means, it's a made-up word. Why do we know it's the indirect object? It's got that "to" in front of it, right? Amelia, I'll give you 2. Blorkel is the leader of Snarflings. So tell me what the noun is and what function it. There's 3 nouns in the sentence. Tell me which ones are which.
Blorkel is the subject.
Okay.
Is the action verb, and then who's the leader of what?
Remember what I said a minute ago about 2 be verbs.
Yeah.
Right.
Two. What'd you say? The verbs
about linking verbs. Remember what
I said? Having 2 linking verbs, does it make it inverse or not? Indirect words too, for those are indicators of indirect objects. Yep, we got that. But I'm looking at the linking verbs. Means structurally where to put, but words in sentence. Subject plus linking verb plus subject complement. So subject linking verb.
So if you have a linking verb, it can't be a direct object, right?
Okay. So the direct object, there isn't one at all, or because someone's the leader of something. So
go look at my screen.
The subject complement would be the Snarflings, I guess. There we go. And subject plus subject complement. And then, so does that mean there's not a direct object? Right?
Is a linking verb.
Right. I got that.
Anytime you got a linking verb, you don't have a direct object. But
Okay, but
what-
you can have an indirect object. There's a subject complement still and an indirect object, or just that's it?
you don't have indirect objects without direct objects.
Okay, gotcha. So there's the subject, the linking verb, and then the subject complement. So, and the subject complement, is it like a word like leader of snarflogs? That whole sentence or that part of the sentence?
Right.
Okay.
If you think about it in terms of a noun phrase, right? Leader
Right.
of snorkelings.
So that whole phrase there becomes the subject complement.
Yeah.
Okay.
Technically, the of snarflings is the object of the preposition of.
Right.
But
Yeah.
if you want to think about it in terms, it's again, preposition phrases are just extra information added on to sentences.
So that would be considered a prepositional phrase then.
Right.
Okay. And so leader, therefore, is the subject complement.
Right. But if you think about it in terms of noun phrases, leader of snarflings, that's a phrase.
Gotcha.
Right.
So then that would be a noun phrase. But so we're thinking of it in context of, like, how are we thinking of it in context with this particular sentence?
What do you mean?
You said, you could consider leader of snarflings the phrase,
Mm-hmm.
and then so the subject of the complement would just be leader, or you could just think of leader of snarflings as the subject complement if we're talking about the actual phrase.
Right. Got it.
So I was trying to determine which you wanted as the answer.
I would, if I was asking this on a quiz, I would count either answer correct.
Okay,
Yeah.
because they're both correct, basically,
Right.
technically. Okay. All right. Well, that actually did clear a lot up for me a little bit there. Made it less complicated.
Maggie, I'll give you this next one. This next one's not too bad. Quibbles, fascinated, flummox. So there's only two nouns in the sentence. So tell me which nouns are which, Maggie.
The first one, the Wibbles,
Right.
and oh wait, I lost it. And the last one,
Flummox.
yeah.
Okay.
Where did it go? I lost it on my screen. I can't find it now. I think my screen cut out. But was it the last one?
Flummox was the last word.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what is quibbles, fascinated, flummox? So what is quibbles? Is it the subject, the direct object?
The subject?
Yes, right. It's the first noun in a sentence.
Yeah.
And fascinated is the verb.
Yeah.
And we know that that's not a linking verb, right? It's an action verb. So the word flummox that comes after it, what do you think that is?
Is it an adjective?
No, it's definitely a noun.
Oh.
Um,
Well,
what traditionally comes after the action verb? Is it the indirect object, the direct object? Which one?
a direct object?
Direct object, right. Yeah, this sentence is fairly simple because all we have is a subject, a verb, and a direct object. Remember, Becky baked the cake. Becky's the subject, bake's the verb, cake is the direct object. Even though these are made up words, you can kind of see how that works.
Because of the word order.
Because of the word order, right.
based on the formulas that you're teaching us, or you have taught us thus far.
Right. This next one, Joanna, you got a little bit of a tougher one here.
Yeah.
Snarblat sat on the gloobwump.
Would snarblat be the subject?
Yes.
All right, and then sat on is a action verb. So wouldn't I'm having trouble with the indirect and direct objects, but I think the glue wump is an indirect or a direct object. I'm just not sure which.
Right.
I feel like it's part of me thinks it's direct because it's saying exactly what it's saying, but indirect because it's like it's not a big part. It's just saying it's sitting on it.
So you're pretty close.
This has the prepositional phrase, right? But it's not. There's no words 2 or 4. Go ahead. I'm sorry. I'm going to let you finish because you're going to explain how that works.
This one's a little different. This one's a trick question almost, because there's
Isn't on the thing a prepositional phrase?
Yes, exactly
Okay.
right.
That's why I was like, what are we doing?
Gloobwump is technically the object of the preposition on. Right? Where can a cat go? On the porch. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So you might ask yourself then, okay, if it's the object of the preposition, then why is there a direct object there? The answer is no. All we have here technically is a subject, a verb, and then a prepositional phrase. You don't have a direct object.
That's
right
the subject complement then, right?
It's not a subject complement either.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it doesn't have a linking verb. It's
Right. There's some verbs. We'll talk about this next week in the verb chapter. But there's what we call transitive verbs and intransitive verbs. And this is the particular type of verb, sat, that you don't need a direct object for. Snarblat sat. Right?
You gave her a trick question.
I did.
Poor Joanna. I was like, poor all of us, because I'm like, I know it's a prepositional phrase, but I don't remember him teaching us a formula to this. What is this? I was trying to figure it out. Well, so you don't put anything there? There's just the subject and the action verb?
The snarblat's the subject. Gloobwump's the object of the preposition.
Okay, but we're not doing that as of yet. We haven't been taught that yet. The object of the preposition.
Well, you know it's the preposition because
of the on. Yeah.
But there is no direct or indirect object.
Right? Okay. I'm saying we hadn't been taught that formula until just now. So.
Right. Well, think about it even in terms of everyday sentences. I walked.
Yeah.
Right. Well, that sentence alone makes sense. You don't need a direct object. I walked. I arrived. Doesn't matter where I arrived.
Oh, well, like this next sentence too. Okay. Because delighted's not a noun.
I'm still confused on the answer to the question that I was answering.
How so?
Just a lot of talking going on, and I kind of didn't get the direct answer, and I was kind of confused.
So snarblat is the subject. You got that right. But gloobwump is all that is the object of the preposition on.
Okay, so it's not technically a noun, or is it still a noun?
It's a noun, right? It's the object. It's functioning as the object of the preposition.
Okay, so that's what instead of indirect or direct object, like I thought it was, it's the prepositional object?
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much.
Welcome. Yeah, there is no direct or indirect object here because this is a type of verb that doesn't require a direct object. Like I just said, I arrived. Well, if I say that, that sentence makes sense. Just the subject and verb. So yeah, I definitely gave you a trick one there, Joanna. Azat, we'll go back to you. Mizzleboop appeared delighted.
1 second. That one is which sentence again?
It's number 5.
Okay, so the subject is Mizelboop. We have verb appeared, we have direct. We don't have direct object, and also there's no indirect object as well.
And so what would delighted be then?
Delighted. Is it adjective? Or
So the word appear is a linking verb, right? Am, is, are, was, were, grow, seem, become, appear. So if you have a linking verb, what's the noun that comes after it called? Anybody can field this one to help them out if you want.
Subject, complement.
Subject,
subject complement.
right. Appear is one of those linking verbs that is an am, is, are, was, were. So as long as you know that that's a linking verb, and you know that the word that comes after it is the subject complement. Adjectives can So here's another wrinkle to throw into this conversation. So we're talking about structural grammar, right? Whenever we think about nouns, we think that it has to be a noun in the slots. Well, delighted is an adjective. So this adjective can also be, this is an adjective that's functioning like a noun, right? So that that traditional definition of a noun is a person, place, or thing. Here's an example where you're delighted is functioning as a noun, but it's not a noun, right? So
You're saying it's an indicator that it's a subject complement? Is that what you mean?
it's a subject complement because of the word appear, right?
Right.
But delight is not a noun in that traditional definition.
No, it's an adjective. But I'm saying, is that an indication if you don't recognize, like if you don't remember, like you haven't memorized the linking verbs? I was wondering if that's what you meant, that it was an indicator. I mean, I know appear is an indicator because, but if you forgot that, is the fact that that in that part of the sentence, the structure, that, where it's an adjective there instead of a noun.
Yeah, adjectives can be subject complements, but
right.
They can't be direct objects.
Okay. Well, I was just wondering if it was also, like, you could also use that as an indicator that that's definitely, a subject complement if you hadn't memorized the linking verbs. Do you get what I'm saying?
Right.
Okay, I was just, so that is right then.
Right.
Okay, most likely that's what it's going to be. Okay.
Yeah, I know. I did this on purpose because I knew these questions would throw you off with these imaginary words. But you guys are getting it. So Amelia, you take the next one. Frazzlebot sent Sparkle moves to Gobbledink's.
All right, and this one has a preposition in it. So
be careful. Be careful.
I know. Sent. I'm looking here too. Nope, sent's not a linking verb. But it means the same as appear, sort of, in a way, but no. Okay. The subject is okay. Frazzlebot, that's who. Sent. I'm seeing it's not a linking verb. Nope. So the action verb is sent. And then we have the direct object is going to be, I'm trying to see. There's something about prepositions. I'm trying to see. So I can define what this is. In grammar, preposition always comes with an object that goes with it, which we know that. So I guess is it like the same that last one that Joanna had? There's an object of the preposition in this one.
No, that one's not an object.
Two's not a preposition, is it?
It is.
It is. 2 and 4 indicators of indirect objects. Okay, there we go. That's what I was looking for in the notes.
Right. You're getting it.
Okay, so, but it doesn't change the order. So I'm assuming the formula. So the direct object is sparkle moose, and then the indirect object is gobbledinks.
Exactly. You nailed it.
Okay. Sorry, it took me so long. I just was like,
Yeah,
is there a trick to this one?
Now this one's the
Right.
traditional word order.
Right.
Direct object, then indirect object. You could flip it to say Frazzlebot sent gobbledinks,
Gobbledinks.
the
Yeah.
sparkle moose.
Still going to be the same direct object and indirect object.
Right.
Okay.
That two is an indicator that it's an indirect. Remember the words two and
4.
are
Yeah.
the indicators of indirect. So I think we're back to you, Maggie. Wobblekins became the favorite of Sproinglets.
What do you have? She just came into my room because hers cut out for a weird reason. Can you repeat her question? She's in here with me now.
So we're on number 7. Wobblekins became the favorite of Sproinglets. So what's what in this sentence?
The first word's a noun. Oh, what? Sorry.
This sentence right here.
Yeah, the first word's a noun, like the subject,
Mm-hmm.
and then
What type of to figure out the next one? What type of verb is become? Is it action or linking?
linking.
Linking, right? So the word that comes after a linking verb, what would that be? It can't be a direct object or indirect object. So
the subject complement.
right. So favorite here would be the subject complement then, right?
Yeah.
And then what about of Sproinglets?
Is it just another subject?
It's extra information that's added on to the sentence. So the word of is it starts with a P.
The preposition.
Preposition, right?
Is that a prepositional phrase or an object of the preposition then?
Sproinglets is the object of the preposition, right? Of Sproinglets is a prepositional phrase, but Sproinglets is the object of the preposition of. That makes sense?
Yeah.
And I also noted, like we were talking about before, favorite is not actually a noun.
It's an adjective.
Right, it's a describing word. So like we were talking about, it indicated without, if you didn't remember, that became was a linking verb. That's what linking verb became then. So
right.
I'm noticing that now. Okay, cool.
Good, Maggie. Joanna, you're next. This one's not a trick, Joanna. This one's pretty straightforward.
Thank goodness.
Right.
I think the subject is Sningletop, right?
Right.
And then handed, isn't that the direct object? Twizzlewinks?
Right.
And then is indirect object Whizzlewham?
Right.
Yes.
You got
Thank
it.
goodness I didn't get a hard one.
Yeah, the word to indicates that it's an indirect object, right? So this is a traditional word order, no flipping it around. So, Azat, we'll go back to you. Quizzle seemed extremely interested,
The subject is this quizzle blorp.
right?
Linking verb is seemed. Subject complement is interested, and I would assume extremely is adverb. If
Yep,
yeah.
you got it. Quizzle the subject. Seem is a linking verb. It's one of those 4 verbs that aren't am, is, or, was, were. Right? Grow, seem, become, appear. Grow, seem, become, appear. You just got to memorize them. And then interested. Interested is an adjective. But again, it's functioning in the role of subject complement. So you got it. Amelia, you got the last one. Liberblot danced with snoggleflops.
Blizzardblatt is going to be the subject.
Mm-hmm.
Danced is the action verb. And then Snoggleflops is going to be the direct object.
Actually,
Hold on. Yeah. Is that the object of the preposition?
yep.
Okay.
You had the
Dance with.
same.
I
You had
saw
the same
with.
Joanna got the same.
Right. Yep. I'm like, with. Wait a minute. That's a preposition. So it's a prepositional phrase. So object of the preposition. Yeah, you hadn't taught us that until we got to these sentences. You really wanted to trip us up.
Right? I'm full of tricks.
Yeah. All right. Awesome.
So that word Blibberblot danced, you could put a period right there, right? And that would make sense. So that's why we don't have a direct object.
Just the object of the preposition, which would be Snuggleflops.
So yeah, you guys just did an exercise in the structural grammar that we learned about last week. This is something, if you become teachers, you can do it with your students. Just make up words and ask your students what is what here. It's not that easy, right? It's not that easy if you don't understand the words. But the lesson is still there if you know the order, the rules of the order, and you'll know. So I'll probably have some of those on the practice sets that I'll give you guys this weekend. So you haven't seen the last of them. So that's it for that. There's a couple of other concepts I'll go over real quick. This lesson will definitely bleed over into Thursday, as I expected it would. So another thing that you got to, so this is a completely different concept from order. So I'm going to move it down here.
I have a question really quick.
Okay.
When you go to the new concepts, what you taught us previously, I mean, it's still there, but it doesn't apply. We're learning something new, basically. Right. Okay. That's where I was getting confused and thinking things were being super complicated. That's what I meant when I was talking to you about that. I'm like, this makes no sense. Like, what is the relevance of this? But it's just a totally different way to look at nouns, a different concept. We're not using everything that we just learned and including what we're learning now and trying to put that into a sentence and label what it is. It's going to be the new concept we're labeling.
Yeah, we're not doing subjects, direct objects, indirects.
Okay, so that's where the book was like, I'm trying to answer the questions on the discussion stuff, and I'm like, this is too much. Okay, all right. That's what I wanted to know. Thank you.
Yeah, if anything today, Amelia, I've taken the book and I've made it even more complicated than what the book is.
Actually, you kind of cleared it up for me. It makes more sense with the way you just explained it.
Good.
So the way the book was explaining it is what I wasn't understanding, and that's why I was telling you. I'm like, this makes no sense. What is the relevance in knowing this, this, and this, and how can I label a sentence? Like, whoa, how do I remember all these rules and use everything that I just learned to label this? Do you know what I mean? Like, this is super complicated and sophisticated. Like, what in the world? And so now I understand, and I'm realizing that this is just a new concept. We're labeling it differently, and we're simply labeling it what you're teaching us now.
Right.
Okay. But do you understand how I was like, what?
Right.
Okay. So thank you for clearing that up. Appreciate it. I'll let you do your lesson.
So next concept, just in the 10 minutes we got left, remember I'll just spend a minute or two on this, but remember the common nouns and proper nouns. Right? This is definitely an elementary school type lesson. And a common noun is a noun that isn't specific, and a proper noun is a noun that is very specific. So if we have a common noun would be professor, like which professor? It could be any of the 60 some we have here at Bluefield State, right? Proper noun is a specific one, Dr. Yeager. Right? And the traditional rule is, and there's no trickery involved with this, proper nouns are capitalized, common nouns are not. Okay? Dr. Yeager's a name, it's capitalized, but professor is not. It's a common noun. Now, if you wanted to call me Professor Yeager instead of Dr. Yeager, you would capitalize professor in that case because it becomes a proper noun at that point. So you guys can kind of see the gist here. Common is not specific. Proper is specific. And then I'll just say here, proper nouns are always specific and capitalized. So easy enough. Lots of times students, whenever you start looking at papers, students will capitalize common nouns. So that's something you kind of have to drill them on. And I don't know if I want to go over this in the next 5 minutes. This one's pretty tough. This is a tough one. Let's just do this next one, and then we'll start with plurals on Thursday. But whenever you're doing writing, you also, lots of times, bad writing comes from being too abstract in your noun choices. And lots of times, good writing is specific. So even anytime that you guys are practicing writing, you want to be specific as possible. You might ask yourself, what's he mean to be specific as possible? Well, here's a case. Today's society. That's not a very specific noun phrase. Today's society. That can mean a lot of things, right? But a specific type of today's society is 21st century American literary culture. So I'm being super specific about the society that I'm talking about here. 21st century American literary culture. So oftentimes you just kind of want, this is just a matter of style. I'll specify this here. It's a matter of style. You want to stick to concrete nouns over abstract nouns. So good writing, my lesson here pretty much is good writing is concrete, not abstract. Okay. And plurals, that's a whole other can of worms. That's probably going to take 30 minutes to talk about. So I'll just make a note here. Start of Thursday's lesson. Make a note and highlight it. That way I know to start here on Thursday. You guys did good. I think you guys especially now have direct object, indirect, subject, complement, object, and prepositions. I think you guys got that stuff down after our lesson today. So, anything else before I let you guys depart? And like I said, we'll finish on Thursday. So, see you guys then.
The discussion post. What is?
I haven't posted it yet.
Okay.
I'm going to tomorrow.
I just looked at Moodle. I was like, and I was muted, and I didn't know where my screen was. I was like, whoa, wait.
Yeah,
Okay.
all I've got on Moodle right now is as an announcement talking about what you'll be doing over the
Right.
weekend.
That's why I was like, wait, do we have to have this discussion done before next class? Okay.
No, not before next class. It'll be during across the weekend.
Okay. Awesome. Well, you enjoy tomorrow, and we'll see you on Thursday.
See you Thursday. See you guys.